The April 19th, 2018 meeting of the Woodbridge Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
And Mr. Treebwasser.
Here. Mr. Secretary, will you please make a note that Mr. Delapietro had a prior engagement and will not be in attendance tonight?
So noted.
Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. January 10th, 2018, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Harris, please read the closed session statement.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. There will also be a student residency hearing. And finally, we will receive attorney-client advice regarding School 18. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Do I have a motion?
So motion?
Motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Board will retire to closed session.
Good evening, everyone. I am very proud to introduce the Avenel Middle School Honors Choir. This audition-only choir started last year and had only 5 8th grade members. In just 1 year, the group has grown to 30 members and is now available to all 3 grade levels. The last time they were seen here was at the winter concert singing the Christmas classic, All I Want for Christmas Is You. Tonight they will sing 2 pieces from the upcoming spring concert on May 16th. The first song is called I Dream a World, written by the famous composer and conductor, Andre Thomas. The second song, Jabberwocky, is based on Lewis Carroll's famous poem from the book Through the Looking Glass. This book is more famously known for Walt Disney's cartoon Alice in Wonderland. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the Avenel Middle School Honors Choir.
Such a dream.
Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to reconvene the meeting?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, second.
Second?
Second by Ms. Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar,
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Here. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meetings?
So motion.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any corrections or additions? I have a motion by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any notice of bids received by the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. On March 23rd, 2018, PD 19-01 for athletic team supplies. On April 10th, 2018, project number 8, new building for Ross Street School. April 10th, 2018, project number 7, additions, renovations, alterations for Woodbridge Middle School. And April 18th, 2018, project number 17-2900, asbestos removal at the Woodbridge Middle School.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any communication or reports received by the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. On March 26, 2018, we are in receipt of a notice of hearing from the Woodbridge Township Planning Board regarding Block 516.23, Lot 3, Zone R-6, 233 Temple Way in Colonia. March 28, 2018, we are in receipt of a notice of hearing from the Woodbridge Township Planning Board regarding Block 1.02, Lot 792, Zone M-1, 10 South Inman Avenue in Avenel. April 4th, 2018, we are in receipt of a notice regarding the application for a permit of approval has been filed by the Middlesex County Engineers Office to replace the St. George Avenue culvert, number 1-C-503.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record Superintendent's report for the month of March.
Mr. President, I have the following reports to present to the board: the student registers and the security and fire drill reports, suspension reports for elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and the reports of the attendance officers.
Thank you, Dr. Zaga. Dr. Zaga, please introduce our student representative this evening.
It is my pleasure to introduce Adnan Akbar from JFK High School. Adnan is the captain of the track team. He's the captain of the academic team. He's a member of the Chinese Honor Society, FBLA Vice President, Model U United Nations Vice President, co-founder of DECA, Class Vice President, Vice President of the Woodbridge Youth Leadership Council, and American Legion's Boys State participant. Adnan is interested in studying business management in the fall. Adnan?
All right, hello Woodbridge Township Board of Education. My name is Adnan Akbar. I'd like to thank you so much for having me at this meeting and allowing me to speak at the great things going on at John F. Kennedy Memorial High School. So starting in February, JFK held its annual Mr. JFK event. Mr. JFK is one of our school's biggest and most talked events of the year. Every year, teachers nominate a male senior who they believe most embodies JFK. After nominations, the senior class votes and narrows it down to 10 students. Over 400 students came to see 11 candidates ballot out in modeling, talent, open-ended questions, and trivia. I was luckily nominated, and I can say it was one of the greatest nights of my life. Another exciting event that was held in February was the 4th annual lip sync contest by FCCLA. The contest pits teachers against each other in dance showdowns. Teachers collaborated with students by having them be background dancers. For example, my AP Environmental Science teacher recruited a couple of students to do a synchronized dance to Gangnam Style. The English department acted out the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song, and the art department did a Spice Girls songs. The night brought out a lot of laughter and cheers for the 15 brave teachers who lip-synced and danced on stage. At the end of the night, the event was able to raise a substantial amount for FCCLA, and they were able to attend their competition. On another note, Kennedy Athletics has been doing very well. The JFK, Colonia, and Woodbridge hockey team was an unstoppable force. They started out their season 7-0 and ended the season at the state championship at the Prudential Center. They worked together, gave the schools one of their best seasons they've had in years. On the track, both boys and girls did very well, bringing home countless medals and breaking school and personal records. JFK's very own Jalissa Lovett brought home a gold medal in the high jump at the state level. The boys team crushed the competition and took home the Blue Division title at GMC's. Down in the lanes, the bowling team did exceptionally well. Senior Dylan Mackin continues to lead his team to victory by putting some of the highest scores on the team. On the wrestling mats, Kennedy's own Aaron Coleman got his 100th win and went to Atlantic City to wrestle at a state-level competition. Kennedy Athletics has started out the spring season with the boys track team currently 4-0 and the girls team 2-1. On the field, the baseball team has started out their season with an amazing record. They recently beat out Red Division rival Edison 3-1, and at the end of this month, the track team plans to hold the annual Mustang Invitational, which invites 20 schools to compete in races, high jumps, and throwing. Alongside athletics, our academic teams have been doing extraordinarily well in nearly all of our competitions. The academic team closed out the season with 2 first-place wins, one at Allentown High School, beating out rival Biotech High School, and the day after that, just a couple miles down from the school, at Colonia's annual academic challenge. Once again, our team faced a close match with Biotech High School and were able to close the season with a strong finish. The academic team had one of its best years in JFK history, and as a 3-year member, it has been a highlight of my high school experience. In other news, our math team went to the Central Jersey Math League competition at Perth Amboy High School, and Neve Shaw was able to finish in the top 10 and qualify for the American Legion Region Math League, a national competition at Penn State University. In the month of March, the school play, The Beauty and the Beast, had the cast, band, and backstage crew put on quite the show. The set design did a wonderful job of impeccable sets that transformed the stage into the fairy tale setting of The Beauty and the Beast. Dr. Jacobson, Miss McKeever, and Miss Scott did an amazing job with casting students who prepared weeks to truly embody their character. The band, conducted by marching band director Mr. Cabrera, delivered with music that set the mood for every scene. The cast performed to sold-out crowds on the Friday and Saturday shows. During the second week of March, visitors from Middle State came to review JFK High School for accreditation. The Middle State team spent 5 days at our wonderful high school interviewing students, teachers, and staff about how they felt about our school's academics, athletics, and arts programs. At the end of the week, JFK received outstanding support from Middle State and were accredited for the next 10 years. At the end of March, the National Honor Society inducted 38 new students to NHS from the junior class. The students were selected through highly selective criteria. Students had to maintain a strong GPA, have more than 20 volunteer hours per year, and be involved in multiple in-school and out-of-school activities. NHS also held its annual spring blood drive, which had over 100 students, staff, and parents come out and donate blood. The school was able to donate quite a bit to the Central Jersey Blood Center. And throughout the month of March, Miss Santana and Mr. Phillips, along with 70 students, started a new club called Dude Be Nice. The club focuses on thanking students, staff, and teachers that go unappreciated at JFK. Some examples include students serving food to the cafeteria staff, giving our librarian, Mr. Paul, a book full of thank yous, and JFK is the first school in New Jersey to take part in this initiative. To see more, you can tune in to Channel 35 to see the surprise we did for our athletics trainer. During the first week of April, the JFK band went down to Disneyland and competed in multiple events, winning quite a few prizes. You can come support our band for their spring concert on April 25th and the JFK Choir at their concert on May 9th. Last weekend, JFK held its annual gift auction. The gift auction is the main fundraiser for the senior class project graduation night. The auction had baskets, gift cards, and even a 3D printer. These items were donated generously by stores, parents, and students. The auction ran from 4 p.m. until 11 p.m. and had over 600 attendees. Project Grad cost about $25,000, and at the end of the night, the auction was able to raise $35,000 for the senior class. Upcoming in the month of May, the school will hold Senior Awards Night. This night will provide over $50,000 in scholarship money to students. Also in the first 2 weeks of May, JFK will be a testing center for AP exams. Our school has a record number of 288 students signed up to take 482 rigorous exams. Being a student at JFK for the past 4 years has been a memorable experience, although I can't wait to receive my diploma on graduation. The day after graduation. I truly understand when our principal, Mr. Salento, says that our school is one of the best in New Jersey. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight. And I'd also like to add on some of the happenings at School 19, School 24, and Ford's Middle School. So School 19, the students, along with Student Council, raised $417 for Pennies for Patients for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society by holding silly string shenanigans. Title I students participated in their homework club over the past 12 weeks. On March 29th, fourth graders presented an interactive wax museum. They dressed up as some of the world's most influential people and gave biographies as if they were that person. At school number 24, Kennedy Park, the Extended Day Academic Support Program is offered after school once a week on a one-to-one basis to immigrant students in grades 3, 4, and 5 to provide individualized attention on homework assignments, classroom test preparation, and reading and comprehension skills. At Ford's Middle School, on March 10th, the following students finished 18th overall, but first in county in the National Academic Quiz Tournament's New Jersey Middle School State Championships, hosted by the Middlesex County Academy. Sophia Alvarez, 8th grade, Sneha Bhatt, 6th grade, Darshan Lakshana Murian, 8th grade, Karthik Manian, 8th grade, Anantesh Mahapatra, 8th grade, and Morgan Ryan, 7th grade. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight. I ask everyone to try and take some time out of their day to come see for yourselves the amazing things that are happening at Kennedy High School.
Outstanding. You're part of the reason that JFK is as well and acclaimed as it is. You are more than welcome to stay this night if you'd like to stay the rest of the meeting.
I have to prepare for a Chinese presentation tomorrow. I'd love to stay.
Certainly understand. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Salento for coming here and supporting his students, another sign of great leadership. Dr. Zaga, do you have any recommendations this evening?
Mr. President, I have 21 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion to approve the superintendent's agenda?
So motion.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. I have a motion by Ms. Anderson, a second by Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Mr. Secretary, roll call, please.
Ms. Anderson?
On item number 13, I will abstain in the name Marie Anderson. Yes on all other items.
Mr. Harris?
I will be doing the same on item number 13. I will abstain in the name of Daniel Harris and vote yes on the remaining agenda.
Mr. Molnar?
On item number 13, I'll be abstaining in the name of Brian Molnar, yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Same here, Mr. Secretary. I'll be abstaining on item number 13 under the name Akshar Siddhana. Yes on all other items.
Mr. Tamburello?
Thank you. I will also be abstaining under the name Ezio Tamburello on item number 13, so that I may join my fellow board members at the school board workshop. Yes on all other items.
Mr. Velez?
I will also be abstaining on item number 13, yes on all others.
And Mr. Treebwasser?
I will also abstain on item 13, yes on all other items. Roll call, Mr. Secretary? You did that, thank you. Okay, policy and planning, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendents of Schools, present the following 16 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Mr. Molnar.
on item number 1, I just want to congratulate all the volunteers of the year, the PTOs for the President's Council. Last Friday night, they held their annual dinner dance where they raised scholarship money for the students of this district. We got to honor all the recipients for all their hard work. And just a big thank you to our PTOs, everybody, even if you weren't recognized as a volunteer of the year. If you do volunteer, you do make the school district the best school district in the state of New Jersey by helping each school make its own little individual community. So thank you and congratulations to all our recipients.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Treebwasser?
Mr. Harris.
I'd like to also recognize item number 4. A number of board members and I wish to recognize Mary Alice Jackow, and I appreciate the board also recognizing her. She is a super volunteer at John F. Kennedy Memorial High School for the past 8 years. She has run the Project Graduation Gift Auction, which, as mentioned by her student representative, took place this past Saturday. Historically, that event raises between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. Again, they had another successful year. Mary Alice this year is stepping away after 8 years of leadership. So I wish to once again recognize her, as Ezio and I recognized her on Saturday night for raising in 8 years under her leadership $396,000 in 8 years. That's a true tribute to not only Mary Alice, but also her loyal band of fellow volunteers, roughly totaling about 24 to 30 different volunteers. So real credit to them. It affords every JFK senior with a free project graduation opportunity, which is not the case at the 2 other high schools. The 2 other high schools do put in fundraising efforts, but nothing, frankly, compares to the tremendous effort through the gift auction at John F. Kennedy Memorial High School. So just want to recognize Mary Alice and her fellow band of volunteers once more. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Curriculum, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to say on behalf. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 11 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any
Mr.
comments?
President? Sorry.
Mr. Harris, please.
Yeah, I wanted to, like giving recognition, credit where credit is due. On item number 3, my good friend across the way, Mr. Sedana, I know championed this particular issue. It's a 5-credit pilot course that will be initiated beginning this September, web design at Colonial High School. So I wanted to give Mr. Sedana credit for pursuing this initiative and urging the administration to look into other career development opportunities, a growing field in web design. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Sedana for his diligence and the administration for accepting this terrific idea.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Dr. Zega. Thank you, Mr. Bader, for supporting it.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Finance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you. Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 13 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 13 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
One correction, 33 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Security and School Safety, Mr. Velez?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Security and School Safety Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, present the following one item, and I move for adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Technology, Mr. Sedana.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Technology Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, present the following one item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Sedana. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Athletics and extracurricular agenda, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 17 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Buildings and Grounds agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Buildings and Grounds Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving items 1 through 4.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
On item 3, I will be abstaining. Yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Transportation, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Transportation Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 12 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Cafeteria, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Cafeteria Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following one item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Velez. Do I have any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Director of Personnel Services, presents the following. I have one change in item number 25. It should read, the total for Deborah Babenchek should read $766.50. I will be moving 41 items this evening.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yeah. Yes. I will be. However, I will be abstaining on item number 29 in the name of Kathleen Harris.
Mr. Molnar,
In item number 7, I'll be abstaining on the name Pamela Kaminsky. There's nothing against the employee. I have nothing against the employee. I just felt that this job assignment, this school should have been filled maybe by a principal who's been a sitting principal for a number of years now. Yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations this evening?
I don't at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Is there any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Mr. Harris?
Thank you, Mr. Treebwasser. This evening, Albert Tassani of what is that? Royal Albert's Palace, located in Fords, New Jersey, is hosting for free School 18 students who had their Valentine's Day dance canceled back in February. I believe he's offering not only his venue for free, but also feeding all of the students free of charge. So just want to give a shout out to Mr. Albert Tassani. I don't know what town he lives in, but he's certainly a very well-respected businessman here in the Woodbridge Township community. So thank you, Albert. That's it for me, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other comments?
Through the board president,
Yes, sir, Mr. Tamburello.
you'll all bear with me. I have a few shout outs this evening as well. Many ceremonies coming up. I mean, I thought June was a busy month, but March and April are certainly just as busy. First and foremost, Colonel Parker at Woodbridge High School for another outstanding ceremony with the junior ROTC at Woodbridge High School. Attended that ceremony, and he really gets those kids ready, and those are some dedicated, committed young men and women, JROTC at Woodbridge High School. So good job, Colonel Parker. I'm going to piggyback on some of my fellow board members with their comments. Certainly President's Council and our volunteers of the year. Congratulations to all of those winners, and for President's Council for once again putting on a great dinner event and raising a lot of money for scholarships. We spoke about Mary Alice and the tremendous job and the tremendous amount of money they raise year over year for Project Graduation. Dan and I were there that night, and you know it's busy when you're at JFK and you have to park at Island Middle. It's just mobbed, and it's an army of volunteers that make that thing happen every year. So great job by Ms. Jacko. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the middle school honors band, or a middle school band day by Ms. Benkert and Ms. Bolden coordinating that on a Saturday. Kids were there from 9 to 4, learning new pieces, working with guest conductors, and they ended it off with the collaboration of all the middle school bands, I believe, except for Island. Just amazing, amazing talent. And Ms. Benkert and Ms. Bolton for putting those on. Nice job by you all. And close to the end, JFK Honor Society, the coordinator there, Colleen Karowski does a great job. Attended that one again this year, and it's always a really formal, great setting, and Colleen does a great job coordinating that, as does Ms. Roberts. Mr. Sedana and myself were there this year at Colonia High School. Again, it's multi-year she's been doing it, and they have these ceremonies down to a T, and it's very formal, and it's a great acknowledgement of our young people. Last but not least, Mr. Harris, for once again helping coordinate a successful Colonia Cleanup Day a couple of weeks ago. He would never mention it himself, but that happens twice a year, and Dan and the committee definitely get the kids out there, and we clean up around the township. So that's it for me this evening, and I thank you for the time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Tamburello. Are there any other comments or questions for the board? Keeping with past practice, we will open this portion of the meeting for statements from the public. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone. Provide your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D. Any?
Mr. President, can I chime in real quick?
No, you missed it. No, I'm kidding.
One item. I'll be a member of the public real quick. I want to recognize
You have to go stand up at the microphone and state your name, please.
Dan from Colonia. I just want to recognize the crew in the back there. Those are students from John F. Kennedy Memorial High School's AP U.S. Government and Politics class, Ms. Mayer's class. They're coming out to school board meetings and town council meetings. So welcome, everybody. I'll be over to give you a debrief if you have any questions afterwards. And board members, I invite you to join and say hello. So thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And thank you all for coming. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion?
Motion by Mr. Molnar, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.